ticker on the top of my screen.
Yeah,
Oh.
same here.
We're all live.
Oop, we're live. Okay, everybody, pretend to get along.
Gotta be
I'll
professional.
try.
All right, so we're going to set up so we can read out comments. Let's see. And it actually says we are live now.
Okay, so everybody's watching.
We're 30 seconds in, man.
Mine
wars.
says, hey, if anybody is listening, throw a comment down so we can tell that we're not just talking into space.
Oh, there's somebody already.
Joseph Mason says hi.
Awesome.
Yo.
Joseph.
All right, some more people. It's Alex, Malachi are both on. Awesome. We've got a couple of people watching. Okay, so Deadly Tarantula Girl coming to you from my inside studio, and I have an amazing panel of guests today for this Retic Roundtable. So I hope that you guys are seeing. Oh yeah, you are. So just beneath me is Jay Brewer from Prehistoric Pets out of California. And then to the top right is Garrett Hartle from Reach Out Reptiles coming to us from Pennsylvania. And then below Garrett is Jake Klotz with JK Reptiles. And wait, who's in Pennsylvania? You, Garrett?
Yes.
And what state are you in, Jake?
Illinois.
Ugh, cold.
Yep.
Yucky.
Yeah.
All right. So first and foremost, I want to thank these amazing gentlemen for coming on. This has been months in the making, and I'm so excited about the show. So obviously, Jay, you're huge on YouTube. Tell us a little bit about how you got started in retics, just quickly, because probably everyone pretty much knows, and why you decided to jump on YouTube.
Well, basically, I got on YouTube when they were trying to, the very, very beginning, HR 669, when they were trying to ban about 1 billion kinds of animals for being non-native. And, you know, they were trying to ban everything from a parakeet all the way down to almost everything. So at that point, I just decided, wow, I need a voice. This is crazy what they're trying to do. And so I just started on YouTube, and out I went from there. So now I'm on a lot of other platforms, and I've been well received. And so now there's a little bit bigger, group of people that can be gotten a hold of and talked to. But luckily, on the HR 669, we made such a wave that at the time they were talking about NAFTA and all this other stuff. And they said that they got more phone calls about that than anything. And so ended up just immediately dropping HR 669. And then eventually they broke it down to the python ban. So they just tried to narrow the scary snakes off so that maybe they wouldn't get so attacked. And luckily, because they were not very on top of the legal part of it, they luckily failed. And, so we're kind of all, have animals because we love them and different reasons. And I got into them basically from when I was a little kid. I was basically an orphan and had no money. And so the only thing I could do to have fun was go catch lizards, snakes, and frogs and run around irrigation ditches. And that love that I got never really left me.
Awesome. Yes. So if any of you did not know, Jay was a major player in getting that potential ban overturned. And so everybody should be thanking him. And of course, USARC and all the things that they do.
I just had a little part in it, but a lot of people don't know the bullet we dodged in the beginning when we actually went to Capitol Hill. And what happened was we were able to put the whole thing off because of the amount of animals that have, being the people that had put in on the lawsuit had enough collectively, in taxes and ideas of how much money that was done that was able to hold it off. And then when we actually lost, that was because we didn't recreate that document, but it turned out great. And USARC took care of all that, so we're proud of them. And I just one of the many spokes in the wheel that helped make it happen. It took a lot of people and a lot of efforts across the whole United States and even other states and scientists getting involved to give us a little bit of momentum to keep our ground.
It was a big deal. It affected a lot more people than just reptile keepers. That's, I think, another thing that people don't realize. So you had the academia world, the zoological world, private keepers, all kinds of people that just didn't want to get sort of trampled under by sweeping government stuff. So it was pretty cool to watch the variety of people brought together through that.
Right. Yeah. Incredible. Amazing. I
Well,
personally.
the government did manage to get over $2 billion, $2 billion in Florida and over $2 billion in, at least that's what I listened to on one of their opening topics, why our jobs weren't important, because it was monumentally nothing compared to the amount of money that they'd already spent on it. They confessed right in front of the world that they spent over $4 billion on the pythons, and I don't know how you spend $4 billion and don't go catch everyone or
They're
remove
still
the
doing it.
Everglades
They're
and
still,
rebuild
remember
it.
when they brought them in with that cold winter and they
They
microchipped
all
them and they
died.
re-released
All
them?
died, but 2 that they drug in.
Yeah, they
and
saved them and then put them back out. Thanks, guys.
Right, and they said so. So anyway, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, government doesn't run like we have to run our businesses or anything we have to do, and that's just the way government goes. And we're not going to go down the government trail because we'll never get to another snake comment again.
Well,
That's true. That is true.
now, Garrett, you have an unusual story as well. I know that you were kind of out of the world early and also kind of turned to animals. And so tell us a little bit about how you got started and why you chose Retics.
I got into snakes specifically later because my mom hated them. And through much begging and pleading, I was able to get my first carpet python. It was actually my first snake when I was 15 years old. I was already keeping all kinds of crazy stuff by then. And then my second snake was a pure Jampea retic. And to this day, I can't remember if I bought it from Bob or from Jay, but it was one of those guys at one of those Southern California things. And so I liked those. I've always liked the reticulated pythons. And if anybody has ever had them, then I don't need to explain to you why. But it was much more of a hobby, and I had a lot more diverse collection until really, I think anybody that's into retics is going to get funneled to one of just a few people that founded it, and Jay Brewer is one of those. And I grew up in Southern California, so that was kind of his jurisdiction, right? So I had a much more labor-intensive job and ended up breaking my back with horses and was laid up for a while and couldn't work. And
Brokeback Mountain, right?
That's right. Yeah, right up there in Brokeback Mountain. Yeah, you remember well. I'm sure you can. I'm sure anybody that wants to go back to Jay's.
Worked for me for how many years?
Oh my goodness, yeah. Anybody that wants to go back to 2009 and watch Jay's videos, you can hear him crack that joke at me as many times as he could. But at any rate, yeah, it was me and one other cowboy broke our backs up there on the mountain. So that's where that started. But basically, I was volunteering down at Jay. That was the very beginning of the reptile zoo side of things, because you were a pet shop and you were just starting to sort zoo animals to one side and pet shop to the other. And I used to just hang around all the time and somehow ended up working there. Worked with Jay for 3 years, and that really exposed me to, obviously that you guys were specializing in reticulated pythons at the time. And so
a lot of new morphs. That's kind of what I've always
huge.
specialized in.
Do you remember the very beginning? Like one of our first conversations, I think our very first conversation was about hunting and fishing. And then like the second conversation was about how golden childs were better than titaniums. I said golden childs were better than titaniums. And you're like, come here, let me show you something. And he took me, that was the first time I went in the back rooms of Prehistoric Pets and tub after tub.
Left with a citron.
I did, a pair of citron tigers.
Did you really?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that was Jay's fault. Yeah, I think he took me to buying one and then gave me one, or so, it was a buy one, get one free deal. And actually, for those of you guys that remember, I did a charity thing called My Snakes Save Lives. That was with the babies of those snakes.
Oh,
but yeah,
wow.
he basically took me in the back room and showed me tub after tub after tub of why I was wrong and how variable the titanium gene can be. And I still think
it's more acceptance of other genes, unlike the golden child just walks over the top of them.
Overpowers
it. Better gene.
To be fair, the golden child versus titanium. The only thing that was in golden child at the time, I think, was albino, and titaniums. You had just made the
there
first
was platinum.
Okay, probably. And then the albino titaniums had just come around, and then you had tigers in those as well. And I think you had a ton of citrons at the time, but I don't think you'd made too many titanium morphs like combos yet.
No, there wasn't a lot of anymore. I mean, that was the earlier part. I don't think that that was probably in the first 50 morphs before you worked for me. You're talking when you first came in. That was a long time ago.
It was early on. Yeah, it was
before even when you said
how old we got, how quickly. But at any rate, yeah. So that was it, and that kind of launched me into the big, wide world of reticulated pythons, selling globally and nationally through Prehistoric Pets to chumps like Jake down here. Jake, you bought some snakes from me. This guy's
I got a lot of stuff.
Jake's got a lot of cool stuff. He's smart. He got into a lot of cool stuff that Kevin had because he's over that direction. And, Kevin and Bob and me were, some of the older people. There's some other people. There was I can't quite remember the guy's name. Maybe you guys can help me. The guy that passed away that did the dwarf stuff that what was his name? Nobody remembers his name. Huh?
I don't know.
Gaspar, not Jim Gaspar.
Oh yeah, that's you're thinking.
Gaspar,
you're thinking of Gaspar with the Jampayas.
With the Jampayas, yeah.
Right. Yep.
Yeah,
Jake
really
was a pain in the butt because Jake was really particular about what he wanted. Every scale had to be right on his snake, so I had to send him like 8,000 pictures.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then he finally picked one that hated him for like a year. Remember that?
That was the meanest retic ever, man.
Yeah.
Meanest snake I ever owned. Out of wild caught and everything.
Yeah.
But she was the prettiest, though. She was the prettiest. So.
It was nice anthrax.
Always, yeah. Always.
The ones are always mean.
Yeah.
So Jake, tell us a little bit about how you got retic fever and what you're working on.
Well, I got my first retic when I was probably like 13, 14. Just kind of got the bug, and I had a neighbor that was really into reptiles, so he would take me to all the local reptile shows and stores and stuff. So I was working for my dad, so I had a job, pretty decent job for a 13-year-old. I'd go and I'd buy all these snakes and just kind of collect them, and pretty much overran my whole bedroom. And yeah, as I got older, I've always had, I haven't not had a retic since probably I was 13, 14 years old, and I'm going to be 35 next month, so I've had retics for 20 years.
Still a puppy.
Still a puppy, yeah, but yeah, I've had other stuff. I've had ball pythons, I've had lizards, I've had tons of other stuff. I've always either sold them or traded them so I could get more retics. So I don't know. Always come back to the retics. That's kind of my thing, and I spent hours bugging these two guys a lot of time. Been out to Jay's a few times and bug Garrett quite a bit, questions and talking retics all the time. So, yeah.
Well, a lot of people don't realize how smart reticulated pythons are, and that's kind of the intriguing part about reticulated pythons. They're not like a Burmese, they're not like a boa, they're not like a blood python. They kind of interact and they think, and you can tell when they're happy, you can tell when they're sad, you can tell when they're going to do things. And so the fact that you feel like you're engaged to it a little bit and the respect and engagement, it changes the game. And a lot of people are scared to buy retics because they're like, they all get 25 feet. Yeah. And as Garrett, works with the smaller ones. And the truth is my big ones only get big because I pick them out genetically and work them like crazy to get them there. But a lot of people buy them and they think they don't want them big, and then they have them for a year or two, and then they end up like me and Jake.
Well, they think every snake, it takes a lot of work to get a 20-foot snake. It's
almost
a lot of work in
genetics for most people.
Well, genetics and all that, but yeah, everyone thinks they're going to get massive, and
they're just like dogs too. I mean, people are intimidated by other people's big dogs, but if you got a puppy and it grew up, you're fine with it. You know it, you trust it. So it's, the size thing is not as intimidating, I think, as
not
people.
The factor anymore.
Yeah, it's just the big thing for me is the care that's required by a larger animal. That's probably the part that you need to plan for if you're going to get into them.
And the good part is you don't just end up with a giant snake while you're growing it. Is how you got to, you plan for it, because it isn't going to just grow up one day.
Right.
You're not going to feed it a mouse a week or a rat a week, and one day all of a sudden open your enclosure and go, oh my God, he's 25 feet, weighs 275 pounds.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's kind of fun.
Speaking of less than massive retics, tell us a little bit about how you got onto the dwarf project.
About the dwarf retics? Sorry.
Yes.
Well, basically, there's in 2002 they classified a couple of different races of pythons that are south of. We're talking about Sulawesi retics, or at least that's what kind of started this whole discussion in the beginning. South of that island, there's a little chain. It kind of looks like the Florida Keys ish, and there's two separate subspecies that live on that island chain. One is Staputrii and one is Jampeianus, and those encompass a group of there's a ton of islands down there, like hundreds. But there's 7 localities from there that we have in the United States in the pet trade.
So
And
far, at least as far as the what they found and have identified.
Right.
I
Well,
just
yeah,
looked
it was
and
funny.
South
Somebody
Florida-
asked me, yeah, somebody asked me one time, like, do you have all the retic localities? And it was like, you know, I mean, like, they come from like dozens of countries, and Indonesia alone has retics on the majority of the islands. That one country has 17,000 islands.
Right.
So, I mean, to have
Malaysia
all of
has
them, I'd have
another
to have,
800.
yeah, I mean, if you wanted one of every retic locality, your collection would be 10 times the size of J. Brewer's, you know. So, no, I have 7 localities that I specifically work with. But they're a tremendously variable species. They're all over the place, and there's very little scientific work that's been done as far as kind of breaking off all the different types of reticulated pythons that there were. You know, it's funny when you talk about like boa constrictors. There's been a lot of localities, a lot of subspecies, and different species for years, and they're constantly shifting and reclassifying those all the time. But with reticulated pythons, for the most part, I mean, they've always just been lumped into one big group, which those of us that kind of get in there and work with them realize that there's a lot of different, just a majorly different traits between them. I mean, some of the animals that I work with are, you know, like 1,500 grams as adults, which is like medium ball python size. They're longer and leaner, but you have size from that all the way up. You have different colors, different patterns, temperaments, you know, the way they act and stuff. So it's just, it's an enormously diverse group,
You
and
can
it's
almost
really
just
something
hold a
for
super
everyone.
dwarf and you know it's a super dwarf.
What's that?
I said you can just about hold one with your eyes closed and you know it's a super dwarf. They act more like a colubrid.
Yeah, I would say they act like a Sulawesi, only a lot smaller.
Lots
Because
smaller, yeah.
Sulawesis have that same kind of, like you said, you can hold it and you're like, whoa, it's a Sulawesi, you know. But yeah, so yeah, they all have their different traits. There's definitely something for everybody within the group.
That's for sure.
So, Jake, I know that you've been kind of specializing in the Sulawesi locale, I guess you would call it, for a while. So tell us about that.
I'm
Dr.
sorry, you
EJ.
broke up. What was that? It broke up. What was that?
Tell us about Sulawesis.
Yes. Tell us about your work with Sulas.
So right now I currently have 1.2 pure captive-born Sulawesis. They were bred by Terry Wilkins out of Columbus, Ohio. I also have a couple 50% animals, a few 75% animals. So I've been breeding. My first clutch of Sulawesis was pure Sulawesis. Unfortunately, that was my first year breeding retics, so I didn't really know what I was doing, and it was a small clutch. They ended up all passing away, unfortunately. But the year after that is when I made my first crosses, and I still have a female from that. She's a 2-time proven breeder now. But my pures, I'm still working on getting them to go. They seem to be a little more tricky for the females to get to breed. Mastiff, the bigger of the 2 females, she's right around probably 14 foot, 13, 14 foot. The smaller one's about 12 foot. And then the male's like 9 or 10. But yeah, I'm trying to kind of do the same thing Garrett's doing with the super dwarf stuff, is kind of cross it out into other morphs. And I'd like to see some other combos be made and eventually make some higher percentage Sulawesi combos, stuff like that.
One thing I think a lot of people don't realize if you're newer to the hobby is that, you know, like Jake and I said, we've been working around 20 years ish since we really got started. And Jay's been probably almost breeding that long, right, Jay? I don't know. Do you know?
Not just retics. My first retic I got, technically I got, I don't even want to say, 42 years ago.
That's
42
crazy.
Wow.
So,
But
so
that wasn't real. That was just like a weird fact. But I didn't have retics the whole time. My first time I ever truly bred pythons was 33 years ago, and it was I had a little thing in my backyard, and it was such a rare thing that nobody knew what temperatures to incubate them at. There was a thing called a Python manual, and it was like a 10 or 20 page of all pythons, and it had just a few breedings that had happened in lifetimes, and that was after. I didn't even find that until my third clutch or so. But the first clutch, I just kind of winged it with everybody's guesstimation, and I ended up. Luckily, it was Burmese pythons, and so they hatched at a lower temperature than I would normally incubate them at now, because Burmese pythons, as we know from Florida, they're pretty tough animals and can live. And so, and of course, they only take 56 days to hatch at, say, 90 degrees. So that's a lot different than 84 at 90 for a python. Some of the super dwarfs can be a little bit shorter too. But at the end of the day, it was just sheer luck that I was successful. And then after that, I over the years started breeding thousands of Burmese, and that turned into me getting a lot better understanding of pythons in general. And then the reticulated pythons were a whole nother movie to learn, because there are just a lot more requirements for reticulated python. The eggs are harder to hatch, the incubation period's longer, the humidity requirements are more strict, so there's just a lot more involved. And so that's where I ended up resting in, as the retics, because I really liked the little bit more of a challenge. And so it was a great time. So I don't even know the first year I bred the retics, to be honest. I have to do some math, but it's been a long time. Jake probably could tell us.
Me?
It's been as long as I've been in. I mean, you were full on when I went out there in 2009 or something like that, and I remember watching you hatching out albino retics back when they were. You were one of the first, right?
I was the second person in the world to hatch albino retics. Bob Clark.
Right after Bob.
He started with the tigers, and I had the second genetic stripe delivered to my store, but I didn't want to breed it, so that was still in Burmese, and I ended up telling the guy, just sell it to Bob, and Bob paired it up and found out the genetic stripe was recessive and bred two of them together, and so Bob is truly the first retic breeder in my mind. And then it was probably me, and then Kevin. But it doesn't matter. It's all
back
of us.
in those days, there wasn't as much incentive to breed, because everyone was just trying to keep them as a species. The morph thing was not big with retics, and so everybody just wanted to have one. And yeah, kind of the point I wanted to make was just how different the animals were. So Jake's saying like, oh, Sulawesis seem to be a little trickier, and I feel the same way. Like, wow, when I work with the real like strict locality stuff, they're a lot more difficult. But I think, and Jay, I'm sure that you can attest to this, but the more generations in you breed them, just by default,
cakewalk.
The ones that do well in captivity are the ones that thrive and reproduce the most. And so in time, the domestication process happens very rapidly, and you end up with an animal that, like when I was a kid, everyone's like, oh yeah, retics, those are awful. The reputation was that they're terrible. They bite you, they throw you across the room, they're trying to eat you all the time. And now, if you ask people the reputation of reticulated pythons, it's that they're very mellow and intelligent and interactive, more like a dog. And so that's happened very quickly. And I think it's something that will happen as well within the locality if people cared to work with the localities. The locality stuff doesn't have as much of a financial reward historically as a lot of the morph things do. And so, morphs are prioritized in a lot of people's collections just because, not in a bad way, but just that they're different, you know what I mean? And so people were trying to breed them, like, Jay starting to breed reticulated pythons back really before there was any morph stuff going on, and having fun with them as a species. But then you have further incentive. Once you figured out to breed the species, now there's like new things to do. So you had genetic stripes, you had tigers, you had albinos. You were the first one to produce albino tigers, to create custom morphs. Am I right? What, you were the first with the albino.
Yeah, I was the first for a double gene animal.
Right. And
If I'm not
that was the
mistaken.
beginning of kind of the custom creation with reticulated pythons for this niche. There was already, corn snakes and other stuff, Burmese and things at that time. But and then what Jake is talking about is kind of the with the locality stuff, aside from breeding pures, is one thing. That's one whole separate kind of project. But then what I enjoy seeing is the morphs that are kind of more the classic morphs that we all know and love, and tweaking color using locality influences. So the Sulawesis have a specific type of pattern, a specific type of color. It's easily recognizable. And I'm sure Jake, with your original project, was the Platy Tiger Sulas, however many years ago, was kind of like, wouldn't it be cool to see a Sula retic pattern and color with a platinum tiger? Or for me, it's the same thing, but it's less about color and pattern, usually more about size. Wouldn't it be
I've
cool to
taken
see
a
a platinum
different
tiger
route.
that's smaller? What's that?
I've taken a different route. I actually use the recessive genes to paint the picture. So I use like citron as a paintbrush to make everything else cleaner. Genetic stripe to make everything clean. Citron to make it bright. And
You mean in the heterozygous form?
Correct. So I use different ways. So like a lot of my animals are multi-gene outbred, like got more genes than any retic. I'm sure that if you did some genetic research, I probably have the most genetically,
diverse
animals on the planet Earth, because I haven't line bred for localities or, trying to figure out this locality. I mean, like I have probably 6 lines of Jampias that are in my 3 or 4 different kinds of Jampia morph crosses I made. And then I really only have one type of super dwarf. And to this day, I still hardly ever see them. And they only lay like 6 to 8 eggs, and they just really microscopic. It don't matter if you feed them every day. You can't even feed them anything bigger than a large rat. And those are the ones that Bob Clark imported, and it was kept a secret where they ever came from, and I still don't know. But those were the amazing super dwarfs, and those are the ones I like because, I'm not really into the 20-foot Jampia, even though they look like a Jampia, they're shaped like a Jampia, they act like a Jampia, but they get too big.
It's like, wow. The Jampia doesn't make a very good dwarf.
No, but that being said,
and they act like a Jampia.
Yes, exactly right.
Yeah,
which I don't. I'm kind of a mainland guy, but I have a lot of the original bloodlines because I worked them into albino and different things. So I've got a lot of 10, 15-year-old super dwarf things that were all from the original wild caught micro dwarfs. I mean, they're just so much smaller than a lot of the other animals that I've seen that other breeders had. And so I took interest only in the very smallest Jampias. My Jampia line was never much more than 10 or 12 feet. And, I don't know if they're really Jampias because at the end of the day, I've been to Indonesia, I've been all over, and all those guys go catch them and then say they came from here and came from there. But really, I mean, we talk about Sulawesis, right? I mean, we're talking about a 70,000 square mile island. So, it's like we could argue about which one comes from where, but where did it really come from on that island? And they do have a very pronounced pattern, and they're very beautiful. And I think they're one of the prettiest. I say they're one of the prettiest, but I mean, the Philippines have some pretty crazy ones too. So it's too bad that we don't have access anymore to getting a lot and going there and really go collecting ourselves instead of taking what importers have, tagged. And I used to think Indian pythons. I was really into Indian pythons. That's how I got started. And it took me like 15 years to figure out the localities of Indian pythons because they vary so much. And it was just amazing. I mean, it's just like California Kings. I live close to a place called Newport Beach. Well, there's one in Newport Beach, and there's another one out in the desert, and there's another one, coastal, and then there's another one that coastal. And so The locality thing has just barely touched, and we've been locked out of it by the government, and it's kind of disappointing. It's a good thing that Garrett's got some locality stuff to play with, and and enhance what he can out of that. But it would sure be cool to get way in there. And so, and same with the Sulawesis. They're awesome animals. They're very unique looking. They got that beautiful gold. They got the ones I used to see come in. From wherever the locality they were getting them from were incredible. They almost look like a morph, because if you look down, I noticed yours has some of these. You sent me those couple pictures. If you look, it literally looks like the pattern of a retic, and it shifted from two opposite sides. Yours has a little bit of it, but I've literally seen the snakes from head to tail that way, and most of them.
Exact thing. Instead of diamonds, they do
right.
this.
Yeah, exactly, and that's like
that intertwined rope look. They kind of get that zigzagging in between.
Right, it makes a line down the back, and so it would be I really regret, unfortunately, the ones that I had, I bought like 5, and I was going to just, line breed them to keep them in, as pure. And I just decided they were just, the ones I got were probably the most horrific, meanest animals on earth.
That's what I was talking about. Yeah.
And I just literally gave up on them, and I just sold them as pets.
And to be honest
with you, I sold them as pets, but that's what I did.
To be honest with you, you're talking about, so one thing I'm seeing a lot now outside of the US, you're talking about how cool it would be to have access to those things. But the shame is that for the decades we did have access, nobody really cared.
Right.
No.
If you think about it,
didn't care about anything until the Morphs came. I mean,
right. Yeah. And so the morph craze was hitting really in its prime right at the time when
the truth is the morph craze took the beautifulness of all the morphs to have people even believe that a retic could be tame. I probably was the leading person at trying to show people that retics aren't all mean, and it was the hardest job of my life.
No, I agree. People still have a bad reputation. It's not necessarily the animals. When you work with a good breeder and you have the right bloodlines, the animals are awesome.
So obviously, with our channels and everything, all of us, one of our goals is to show how beautiful, how amazing, and how fascinating these animals are, that they're not evil, they're not sinister. And so I don't know if you guys saw like the announcement that I posted and even the thumbnail on this video. I like to belly dance with reticulated pythons because that definitely puts them in a different light when you can see this, large, colorful, beautiful snake, basically totally in harmony with me. And it really is amazing. And they are, I feel like, an underrated animal, and they're really vilified because of their size and because of we didn't know much about them when they were initially being imported, and so they didn't have the best care. And wild caught animals can be more defensive, and so I love that all of us are working to eradicate that nasty reputation that retics have had in the past. And of course, showing a bright, beautiful snake, I mean, that's going to get someone's attention.
That's what you get their attention, and the rest follows. Animals in general, we're all scared of everything that we don't know or understand. So the more that we get a chance to share with the public, the more they start to look in deeper and deeper and realize, oh, I guess just because they're a snake doesn't mean they're deadly.
Right.
The funniest thing is you would never even comprehend out of my 5 million followers how often I hear, I was scared of snakes, now I don't let anybody kill them. I was scared of snakes because until I watched one of your videos where the snake was striking at you, and it freaked me out, and I wanted to know more. And now I realize that was just a descent, and it's so bizarre that a snake biting at me would be what makes people not scared of snakes, but you'd be
by the end of the video, they clicked on it because they're like this evil snake. And by the end of the video, they're on the snake.
Guy's a maniac getting sniffed at.
Say, a poor mom, don't take her eggs away from her. Oh,
right. And so all of a sudden, they see all these little kids wrapped around, 300-pound pythons and petting them, and I got all this education stuff going. So the more we learn online, the less we're going to be scared of things. It's just that fear is something it's just you don't know, and it's false evidence appearing real. You know what I mean? And I'm not suggesting that venomous snakes shouldn't pet them, but you shouldn't be scared even of a venomous snake. You need to understand that they're venomous. You need to stay your distance and respect it. And if people get hurt trying to kill snakes. That's how something like 80% of the bites are from somebody trying to kill a snake. So at the end of the day, we just need to like animals, love animals, and let them be, and stay out of their way, and we'll all be good, kind of like each other, And if you don't like them, if the old saying is, if you don't have nothing to say positive, don't say anything at all. I mean, and so sometimes you have to learn in order to get past all that. And so all of us do a lot of stuff online, and that's really a good thing. And I think that we could never do too much online stuff, because at the end of the day, each person that sees it can tell somebody else, and before you know it, we're where we're at today, where we can have enough followers to sit on a cell phone in the middle of a backyard and talk about the same snakes that nobody wanted and nobody cared about enough to even protect, far less anything else.
Right.
It's a specific kind of person to get on social media, because other than with the exception of a few, like ridiculously negative people, I think most creators, let's talk about YouTube content for a minute. You're pumping out a positive message, and then the public is coming back at you with their negativity. And at the end of the day, when you make a difference, it's because of your ability to remain positive regardless of the negative stuff that you're getting back. You're basically overcoming their negativity with your positive messages over time, wearing them down and flipping them onto your side. Am I right, Jay?
I honestly, I could get, at the end of the day, if nobody's complaining, nobody's listening. I mean, and at the end of and in real life, it's like, I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing is educating people. I know what I'm doing is from my heart. I know what I'm doing is amazingly interesting. And so I really don't care what they think, because if they have enough time to worry about my life that much, then obviously whatever they're doing isn't that exciting. And so
but that's the lesson I'm talking about. I think
I'm okay with it.
Yeah, and I think that's a really hard lesson to learn when you jump onto social media, is that you have to realize, I'm doing this for me. You know what I mean? I'm doing it for the world, but I'm doing it for the world for me. If
because
that
you
makes
love
sense.
it. If you love something enough,
You have to love it regardless of what kind of opposition that you face, and especially when you're working with reptiles. It's funny. We were in Anaheim. I saw you there, Jay, just the other weekend, and my sister has a big following on Instagram, and she stopped by your booth, and Juliet pulled out an alligator for her that had tape like this around its snout. And my sister just had a great time hanging out with the reptiles, and everything was awesome. It was really cool to spend time with the alligator, but because it had tape around her mouth, when she put a picture of it on social media, she immediately got slammed with negativity from people that probably never been around an alligator
Well, of course
before.
they didn't, because if they, that's one cool part I can say is I've went full circle now, and so I'm kind of the point now where I've got millions of followers that defend me, and it's kind of fun. I mean, it's just like people. I don't have to educate everybody. That my all the followers are like, oh, he takes the eggs away because the success rate is much higher and it keeps them from dying. And then when I'm cutting the eggs, he cuts them because he doesn't want them to drown, and a certain percentage drown. And they've seen the videos where I didn't cut the eggs right away and they drowned it. So at some point, you just learn. And like, for instance, to be honest, I probably wouldn't have tape on an alligator's mouth, although it doesn't care. You cut it off, he doesn't open his mouth. It's just a case that in our state, if we want to have an educational permit, it's a requirement. And at the end of the day, I'm glad.
And a lot of insurance companies say the same thing too.
Right.
I'm sure they don't know. If they probably knew I handled alligators, I'd probably maybe have an insurance issue. But at the end of the day, in real life, I don't want somebody with a 500-pound alligator not taping its mouth, because they'll ruin it for everybody when some kid gets his arm ripped off, or and so right. At the end of the day, I think it's a good law, and I like good laws, and I think there are laws that are good, and there's nothing wrong with keeping people safe. And that's what and if I have to keep people safe in order to educate them, I'm okay to follow the rules, because they're giving me a permit to allow me to have an invasive species that can live in California, that can cause all kinds of grief, that's a dangerous animal.
You're talking about alligators now, not reticulated pythons.
Correct. So, I like the fact that they have rules instead of like what other governments do. And what our government tried to do is just to say, oh, we don't want them, all of them, and nobody gets to have them. And so, and that's what I like about having laws. And so there are good laws, but there's a bummer when they try to journalize everything, like every reticulated python's a killer or anything like that. So this is part of social media, and we all get to learn it. And you really learn it when you get into the hundreds of thousands of followers and beyond. It just turns kind of ugly, but then it kind of corrects itself after enough. So that's kind of the good news.
Well, I think we can all have. I mean, it's amazing the amount of information that you learn with a following like yours, and how quickly because of the amount of exposure. But Jake, I don't know. What do you think about with imports banned and everything going on here in the U.S.? Where do you think the future of localities is going?
I mean, I think you gotta cross them. You're gonna have to outcross them out into morphs and stuff. I mean, we need to keep them, breeding locale to locale, but I think you're gonna have to outbreed them into some of the morphs and kind of go that route, because we're not gonna get any new morphs in the country. So that's kind of, in my opinion, that's the next step we need to take.
So
I mean, you agree or?
Oh,
Well, yeah, so that philosophy almost mirrors what Jay was saying about social media. I think a lot of times if you see a platinum tiger Sulawesi, that's an attractive animal to people. So they get that, and then they start teaching themselves maybe more about where that animal came from, what the Sulawesi is. Probably like a lot of dog breeds, you get a dog
Right.
breed because you saw it on the dog show or something.
All dog
And
breeds are crosses.
what's that?
Almost every single dog breed is a cross, just like
Right. Yeah.
all of
And
them
then you
are
get into the
crosses.
history of it more later, and you develop a deeper appreciation for it.
Correct.
And so
Correct.
kind of what I was going to say is when we had this free for all of ability to import, there were very few people that were dedicated to committing to the lives of the wild caught animals they got. They got them more as like oh, this is cool, I have a Sulawesi or whatever it was. And the funny thing is, it's only been 5 years that we've not been able to bring in locality retics. Retics can live easily 35 years. So where are they all? And the absolute reality is they're the wild caught animals. A lot of times, not all the time, but a lot of times they deserve the reputation that retics had back in the 80s and 90s. And it's through the efforts of captive breeding that they've become such an amazing animal. That stuff was already there. It was already in them, but it had to be brought out, developed, and multiplied over time. And so if Sulawesis are bred, either if it's pure locality or outcrossed into morphs, if they're developed by, like Jake has those kind of projects going on, then I think that they are going to be more suitable for the average keeper. But the alarming thing that I see now with the species that the subspecies that I'm working with, they come from very small localities. So whereas Sulawesi is gigantic, you know what I mean? It's like, I think, isn't it? It's bigger than Texas, right?
I
And
think it's
huge
I think
mountain
so.
ranges and everything in between it.
Almost
More than like,
70,000 square miles.
yeah, it's massive, huge
And
mountain ranges, probably multiple different subspecies if they
for
actually got
sure.
there. Yeah, I mean, the Galapagos I like to go to all the time. 13 small islands, and you look at any of the species like the tortoises, how many subspecies they have. The marine iguanas recently went from 6 to 11 subspecies,
Oh, wow.
just with additional studying on that one small thing. So the problem,
the same's even true with even a lot of the super dwarfs, because I've seen
absolutely,
at least 5 kinds of super dwarfs that all came in together.
for sure.
There's no way they weren't different.
Exactly. And so, and I completely agree with that. And the thing is, we don't know enough about them even still. But the problem is the localities. I mean, some of these islands are like half the size of New York Central Park,
right.
and so they get a little bit of a limelight. And then some dude that lives on one of those islands figures out he can sell them at $20 a piece, and he loads a whole bag of them up. It's almost like if you went to a rattlesnake den and just grabbed all the rattlesnakes out of there in the winter, you just wiped out that entire county's population. They're all congregated. So anyway, they're grabbing these things and sending them out, and people are thinking, oh, I've heard of this super dwarf. Here's a wild caught one. That's a chance for good fresh blood or pure genetics or whatever the case is. and people are getting them as pets, or people that have never actually even maybe they intend to breed them, but they don't have a track record, and they end up not following through. The animals get passed around, and there are all these animals that were imported over the decades, just made terrible pets, and then they were ultimately neglected and died. Whereas you see a lot of the captive bred ones going on to have great homes and stuff because they're appreciated by their owners. Just like we were talking about the snakes that did this, were the first ones I got from Jay in later years, anyways. And still breeding them and working with that stuff. Or, Jake, you have a lot of your original stuff, things like that. But it's almost better if, especially with these wild caught locality things, if we're going to have fresh blood, we need to really appreciate it for what it is, even if the snake hates us. So if you're not the kind of keeper that can love something that hates you back, don't get into the early development stages of these different projects, because the animals are not going to thrive with you. Wait until people can develop them, refine them, get in a generation or two working off of like their favorite, best, nice female. Like, I won't name names, but when I worked at Jay, with Jay, it might sound like this was biased, but I used to always say Prehistoric Pets had the nicest retics compared to some of the other breeders. And that might sound biased because I was like trying to sell something, but it was an honest observation. We would get animals in from other breeders like, this snake's a douchebag. You know what I mean? Like, this thing makes retics look bad. And it would take a couple generations to work it out of them.
Yeah, oh man, there's a couple things that we're just barely now getting them 100% to what we're used to. And it's just crazy that the lineage has that much power in its disposition.
Absolutely. I think a lot of that is locality, but it's also individual bloodlines.
Absolutely individual.
So if you want to get into it and just kind of have fun with it and enjoy the animals and interact in that and still participate in the localities, make sure that you're getting stuff from breeders, captive bred, that you can kind of pick up and carry on the torch of the poor sap that's been getting bit and pissed on for 20 years happily.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And then you can take a nice animal from that and move forward with it, to preserve the bloodlines into the future. But that's my message, not as much for Americans, but I already see an international audience tuning in. This would be my message to you guys that have the ability to get the animals that we don't anymore. Don't even work with those. They're not unless you're literally like, I want to dedicate my life to, developing this specific locality into something. Just wait till somebody goes and makes the animal that you really need and pair it up, and then be happy forever, not have those negative experiences that ultimately the biggest loser is always the animal.
Well, the other thing we need to look at is with the island of Sulawesi, we know that it's a huge island. And because it's such a huge island, you're going to have variants in the snakes there. And the local islands that are close to Sulawesi are probably going to have snakes that look very similar to what's on Sulawesi. But the point I'm trying to make here is with the Sulawesis that we have came from a guy that didn't want any part of this. He doesn't want to deal with people saying, no, those aren't true Sulawesis. And we actually know back to the point where they came across and landed here in the United States. But my point is that there are people out there that are doing these pure localities that nobody's ever heard of for a reason. They don't want to deal with it. They have what they like, and they're not worried about even trying to move the animals out.
Or make a reputation for themselves. Yeah. They don't even want to deal with the public.
There are lots of people out there.
Wish there was a way sometimes, but it gets frustrating. I'll tell you, go on Facebook, it's funny. I mean, Facebook's the number one. It don't matter. You could be the newest person in the world and they'll just gut you, where, it's funny. It's a joke. And so sometimes it's just not worth people's time. A lot of times it's not. And why should they put up with it? So I understand where they're coming from.
Sure.
We deal with a lot of experts in different things. And one of the
true experts, not pretend experts.
Yeah, people that have been studying this tarantulas.
I had a 14-year-old school me real recently, and then they'd learned from a 16-year-old. And so I understand all about it. Neither one of them had ever bred a retic in their life, and I got them really upset because I said, well, you know, is this something you've done and you bred them and you know that they need to be this weight or that weight, you know, and it was just hearsay passed around. So that's the unfortunate part about the internet is you need to look at people like Jake and Garrett and people that have actually invested their time and their effort and listen to that a little bit more, because there's so many, most of the people that come and go, they don't ever last long enough to really, they just have an opinion that they gathered from the internet and they really don't even know what they're doing. I don't mean that you have to be, you know, doing it for your whole life, but sometimes when you can look at it, and if they're making a big noise, probably better just listen to everybody and collectively figure it out, because, you know, the internet's a great place for learning, but it's even a better place to get misled if you're not careful.
You got to weed through all the crap.
Right. So it's really good to listen to some people that have been out there for a while, sustained, you know, done it for a while. That isn't their, you know, first clutch, or, you know, and it doesn't mean you can't buy a perfectly good animal from somebody. There's a lot of great people out there, you know, that I mean, I've mentored so many people in their first clutches. It's inconceivable, because the way that I breed my retics is so simple. So I've been able to just teach people really quick on how to breed them, you know what I mean? And so it's just a real simple thing. If they used to be so hard. And so at the end of the day, just remember, if you're going to get into reptiles or any hobby of any kind, do it because you love it. And like Garrett was talking about, if you want to do localities, don't jump into a locality unless you realize there might be some cost to it, as in, like, you're going to have some animals that are grumpy, hard to deal with, not as easy to breed. But you know what? That makes the rewards much greater because of all the effort that you're going to have to put in to be successful. And
Right.
So that is what, you know, you got to do it a little bit for yourself, and in the respects that you got to do it because you love it. Because if you do it for any other reason besides you love it, you're not going to last anyway. And, you know, and then when people complain or say something mean to you that is completely false, you're going to fall apart because you're already not in it for the right reason. So there's a lot of good people that work with animals, and, you know, despite animal rights people, what they think, you know, a lot of them, I wonder what their motivation is, to be honest, because it doesn't seem to be animals when you really dig down in deep. But, you know, at the end of the day, we've been doing it a long time, and, you know, and we all love what we're doing. And I know I can speak for Garrett. I know I can, you know, speak for Jake. I mean, there's no way you wouldn't. I mean, Jake, you for sure, how many years have you worked another job so you could afford to grow your collection? You know what I mean?
I still do.
Exactly.
I work 2 jobs on top of my snakes as well. So, yeah.
And that's passion and that's love, because at the end of the day, it's not about money. Because if it's about money, you won't be doing it very long.
Yeah,
Right.
definitely not. Definitely
you know,
not.
So, yeah, right.
So
And
the live audience that's on, they want to know your secret tips. So let me have your top 3 tips for either keeping or breeding tips from each one of you.
Go ahead, Garrett.
I'm gonna go back to the elephant in the room here, if that's all right. I'm never been one to shy away from conflict, but I think we're having this thing because you guys had those animals listed as Sulawesis, and I heard all this stuff secondhand, and Jake was saying no, they're not. So here's my tip as like a locality guy. Okay, it should always be easier to say that something is not what you think it is than to say that it is what you think it is.
Mm-hmm.
So here's my thing. People ask me this stuff all the time, especially now that I have, you know, we used to just call dwarf and super dwarf, and unfortunately those marketing terms, intentional or not, have been used to kind of blanket over lack of information on locality stuff. And there's nothing wrong with it to selectively breed a snake down, but when you start calling locality stuff out, if you're going to work with locality crosses, to be honest with you, I don't care. If you want something that looks like a Sulawesi but has platinum and tiger in it, I don't care if it's 25% Sula, 50, 75, 87 and a half, whatever. If it's pretty, you like it, good for you, go for it. If you're going to take something and breed it into a pure locality, especially in the United States, where our localities now need to be preserved before they go extinct in captivity, with some of the rarer stuff, I mean, there's a potential that they could go extinct in the wild. Karrampa Islands would be a good one. I have a clutch due to hatch soon. They've never been bred in this country. And one of the main goals is to get some of those babies documented as what they are before they get blended into something that maybe someone thinks their super dwarf thing looks like a Karampa, and they breed it into Karampa Island. Next thing you know, we have these mutts, or scientists switch them from one subspecies to 3 or whatever. Now all of a sudden, all your babies are illegitimate. Basically, I'm trying to get them to AZA hands. So my big tip is this: if you're going to work with a locality, you should know, if you're determining if something is a pure locality, it kind of really has to have 3 things. You should know that it was imported as that locality. It shouldn't have come from somewhere else, or originated from Craigslist ad, or hearsay or whatever, but it should have been imported as that locality, and called that. So sometimes that can be wrong, right? And you need to rely on other things. The second thing is it should represent that locality. And taking into effect, I mean, I have from Bontayang region Sulawesi that Jake always jokes with me like, those aren't Sulawesi. But you believe, right, Jake, that those are from Bontayang region and that
Oh
they
yeah,
are pure
absolutely,
locality.
absolutely,
When he says those aren't
100%.
Sulawesis, what he's saying is those aren't his Sulawesis. You know what I mean? The classic kind of northern central style Sulawesis, which are also the ones, by the way, that Jay was talking about with the patterns that go like this and everything.
Totem
Those are
poles.
the only ones I've ever seen. Is one importer brought them in for a year straight, and they were just so identifiable. I mean, they just have markers that are incredible. Yours have them, by the way, but it doesn't have them in the 100% way that I'm used to seeing them. But that,
No,
I think those are the
my point is
local,
that mine are
the
actually
local
different,
region
though.
Sulas.
Yeah, that they are from that island, but it's kind of like saying, just like, where you live, Jay, you have rosy boas on one side of the street, or your king snakes from Newport versus the desert. You know
right,
what I mean? That they're distinct from one another.
coastals,
Yes. So
Newport
my blend
pays,
things are basically the equivalent of a coastal Sulawesi.
right.
And a lot of those other looks, the kinds that Jake likes, come from more inland areas. But so it should have been imported by that. So if you're going to say something's a pure locality, then let's make sure that it was imported as that. Let's make sure that you can trace it back to that importer, and let's make sure that it actually holds up, like visually looks like what it's supposed to be. It has those traits. Because if something was imported as something, but then it looks absolutely, hi Becky, it looks
The fox
How's
absolutely,
it going?
arrived.
yeah. But if it looks absolutely nothing like it, the danger is this. Let's say I take a pure whatever Karompa. I buy a Karompa from a guy offline, but it really doesn't look like a Karompa, but it is small and whatever, and he said it, so why not? And I breed it into my pure Karompas, right? And you get these 50 percenters that kind of look Karompa-ish and are easier to pass off. Every time they blend in, you're producing another further generation that, if it was the wrong locality, watch out, if that
Right.
makes sense. So, for example, I have a lot of, like Jay, you were saying, originally the old school super dwarves, those old
Yeah,
school bloodlines, when they came in, they didn't have any locality data.
nope.
And there's a lot of different
Right.
looks, a lot of different
And to
bloodlines.
this day, I've never seen any retics as small as those were in my life.
I'm going to send you some pictures. I think you'll be
Yeah,
impressed with my collection over there. So I've been digging around since I
long as you
left.
give me one that eats really good, and I can feed it for 4 or 5 years, 5 rats a week, and it stays there, I'll
I
I'll
I
believe it.
think you'll be happy with the stuff that I have. I'm just going to say that. But anyway, I'm happy to prove you wrong.
I've seen one of those Karompas that somebody had, and it was a very cool snake. And
Yeah,
it was
the Karappas could well be what you were talking about. But at
yeah,
any rate, my
it was
point
small,
is,
and it looked right.
right. And so here's my point. The old school super dwarfs, they're great. They make awesome pets. You know what I mean? But I'm not going to breed those to Karampa because I don't know that they are Karampas, and I can never work it backwards. On
Right.
the other hand, if I want to use that small old school super dwarf to breed to a titanium and make super dwarf titaniums, go for it, man. You're gonna shrink down the titaniums and over many painstaking generations be able to produce something really cool with that. But the pure locality thing is a tricky situation, because the danger is, let's say you guys sell a Sulawesi that even has a small chance that it's not a Sulawesi, or has a small percent that isn't Sulawesi in there. the customers that you sell those to may legitimately be trying to produce Sulawesi's, and they blend them into all these other bloodlines.
They've been doing that for decades.
Yes, exactly. So what's been very hard, and like part of like my quest to work with these 7 localities has been to find the legitimate one. And it's a very fractured population in the US where someone actually has something that was imported directly and it came in and everything lines up, and it was so hard to find that. And I had to pay a guy like 10 G's to get one off of them, and then I have to work with these animals, like I said, that hate me, bite, piss all over me and stuff, to try to get a clutch of these pure locality animals. And my thing is, if I do all that work and then I sell a male to someone, let's say, and they breed it to a female they got on Craigslist that's 4 years old and small, and so they assume that it's Rampa, that literally goes against all the work of the pure locality only.
Right.
So if you're making crosses anyways, or if you have a Sula looking animal with those gorgeous Sula influences, and you want to try to make that a Sunfire or a Platinum, more power to you. Run with it. You know what I mean? Even call it a 50% Sula, because at the end of the day, you're talking about a mutt or a cross.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I might only be 25% Mexican, but I look full blown or not at all, right? Can you see all the Cherokee Indian influence in here? Like the pink freckles, right? So anyway, I mean, it's there, but you can't tell it all. So it really doesn't matter. There's no functional, you know, uh, outcome to me having part Cherokee. So go ahead and say it if you want. Who cares? You know what I mean? At the end of the day, but
Well, let's clarify something on these Sulawesis.
sure.
Where they came from, this guy's had Sulawesis for years. He brought them in. He bought them from an importer, which is a reputable importer. Had them for years. Didn't want to mess with any of this. Didn't really care about breeding. And then about a year ago, I don't know how long,
It's
he,
similar too.
he decided to breed them. These animals have been in the country for a long time, the adults. These babies were just recently produced for the first time because he didn't care. I mean, it wasn't his priority.
So I'm not actually saying anything one way or the other about your Sulas, and I've only barely glanced at some of the pictures. But what I would say is, you said they came in from a reputable importer. That's great. What was his name? You know what I mean? You say that the animals are these wild caught imported animals. That's great. Can you show me pictures of them? You know what I mean?
That
Can
was
you
going to be
can
my
you do
next
that?
point. Is give me some pictures.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with saying something, oh, it's pure Superdorf or whatever, and it's a mix of like old school Superdorf stuff. Awesome. That's fantastic. Use it, drink some stuff down. But don't call it a Karompa unless you actually knew that it was. Right. So that's my world. And it's, Jake, I think this is probably the first time when somebody's seen a Sulawesi that was questioned for some reason, you were saying, right? In all your
Yeah,
years
like the
of
pictures he
working with
sold,
it.
because
But
I
with
got some of the
Superdorf, it
pictures.
happens 20 times a day. And so that's
Right.
where I'm coming in to give you my tip. Tell me who the importer was. Show me the pictures of the parents that look correct and they should be correct and all that kind of stuff. And then, 3, show me that chain of ownership. Because a pure locality at this point, it needs to be like a pedigreed dog. So if I
Yep.
sold
What I
you
was
a
gonna.
champion, I said, no, this is a champion toy poodle, and it's fantastic, and it has bloodlines going back 1,000 years and all that kind of stuff. But I can't tell you who bred it, what bloodline came from, or anything like that. As far as I'm concerned,
Except
even
that's
though it
already
may
all
be a
inbred
toy
animals.
poodle, it's just a pet at that point. It can't contribute to a breeding population of pure champion poodles. I'm sorry, Jay. What was that?
Oh, it's funny. It's just funny using a dog because all the breeds are all crosses.
Yeah, I know. And eventually, you can establish your own bloodline too. You can say it's a prehistoric pets bloodline,
Yeah.
Champea, to differentiate it from a gas
Oh, I mean, the
like
truth
Champea.
is, I have all my stock came off a Jampia female that I fed everything known. I fed that thing like it was a mainland, and it never got. I literally had one female that I had used for a lot of my different projects, and
Which
she
is
was
awesome.
micro, and
Yeah,
she
which
was
is awesome. And because
microscopic
you were the
compared to
originator of that line, in
yeah,
order
and
to differentiate a
microscopic
Champea from
compared to
me and one from you, say it's
right.
a prehistoric pets bloodline
Exactly,
Champea.
because the same time, Bob had bought what was his name that went to Indonesia all the time?
Baldogo,
and his stuff
Alan
got
Cindy.
his stuff was commonly 16, 18 feet,
Right.
And then there was a micro super dwarf, literally from the smallest super dwarfs ever bred to one. And those babies, I grew one up because I wasn't a very big dwarf guy, and I grew one of those up, fed it like crazy, and it was 18 feet, probably faster than any snake I'd ever grown in my life to 18 feet. And it was 50% super dwarf and 50% Jampia, but the Jampia line was big, and it literally acted like some kind of
just overtook
super
it.
dwarf.
Giant super dwarf.
And some of that stuff, to be honest with you, I mean, we're talking about domestication, and when we're talking about dogs, you're talking about thousands of years. When you talk about
yeah,
you're talking
but
about
I don't think
80,
it takes
20.
that long for snakes.
Right. We haven't had that long. So we're still scratching the surface on what needs to be done. But because of that, I think it's more than important
I'm in
now
full
than ever.
agreement that what Garrett's saying is if you have a known animal, you need to protect its lineage and keep it known because at the end of the day, there is microscopic amount of animals that are known where they really came from.
Right.
And, I mean, I know, just like I'm saying, those super dwarfs that I originally started with, I wouldn't touch a super dwarf for years because of all the other super dwarfs that were so big.
Right.
And I mean,
so a perfect example, Jay, would be like those two Sulas with the zigzag pattern that you only saw come in once. If that guy had a bag of them and he brought them in one time, even if you didn't know what they were, but here's a whole bag of 6 of them, grab those suckers and breed them and don't outcross them to other Sulas.
Oh, I was gonna
water down whatever
they were
they
so
are.
miserable. I just decided I don't regret it really. I mean, because they were just I mean, what am I gonna do with 50 of them things? I mean, they were just the most Satan spawn things in the world.
I'd take them.
Yeah.
About 4 years ago, I got rid of a lot of mainland localities that were like nice, legit mainland localities because I was just sick of those suckers getting out of the room and chasing me around like some kind of freaking circus or something. Forget these, man. I'm gonna work with the.
I have a lot of Sulawesi stuff blended into mine because Sulawesis were commonly imported, and I still have my Sulawesi pattern snakes, but they're completely not Sulawesi. And to call it, to call it anything else, but what it is, it would be, a diverse snake. I mean, that's what they are genetically. And I think that
which makes them fantastic for captivity. They're awesome in captivity because of that.
There wouldn't even be a pet reticulated python market if it wasn't for that.
I agree. Completely. But that's actually my point is like the pet Sula, pet Superdorf, pet whatever, kind of blend whatever. That's one thing here, and that's actually best for 99.9% of people. But then if there is a known locality thing over here, and you want to do that, like kind of like Jay was saying, they're harder to work with. It's a specialized thing. It's maybe like more of a challenge for someone who's already worked with a lot of the pet.
If you're dealing with F1s, that's a fact.
Right. And so, to maintain the purity and the information on those bloodlines is a big deal. And I think that's why Jake was calling you out. Now, we all know that Jake is a egotistical jerk, and the way he comes across on social media is all wrong. Right. But I think that
if you're saying it, I guess so. No, I mean, I will say the pictures that I've seen, I do think I think it was the male was the picture I have. That's the full body. That's definitely a Sulawesi. There's no doubt in my mind.
The reason why I think Jake is saying that kind of stuff.
And this was an adult animal too. I think this was the breeder male.
Yeah, and Jake is passionate about the preservation of the purity of what would be a pure Sulawesi. Meanwhile, he's the #1 culprit for crossing Sulawesis into everything. But at the same time, that's two totally different things. Cross over here, make awesome pets, cool snakes for everybody. You know what I mean? Make it rain. Over here, if you know what it is, don't mess with that because like I said, we're scratching the surface. We're building a foundation for an industry. I think you two guys below me can agree with this. This industry is growing rapidly, and there's a lot of room for more. Contrary to popular opinions about too many retics, whatever. This is a rapidly growing industry that has a lot of potential, and we need to preserve the different things that we can right now in the beginning before they're all lost and everything becomes kind of like whitewashed, if you will. So it's just like ball pythons. Everyone does ball pythons. Where's all the locality ball pythons? No one could even tell you. You know, whereas leopard geckos, Jay, I don't know if you're aware of this, but this blew my mind. You know, there's such a hot leopard gecko locality scene now. You
Right.
know, and back in the day, like I bred leopard geckos that I got off of you, blizzard lizards, when I was a kid. You
I
know,
remember those.
and yeah, and I rescued every female leopard gecko I could, no matter what they look like, and I bred them to my male blizzard lizard because I wanted to make those. You know, now there's this whole scene where it's like, no, let's preserve all the different localities of them, and people are importing them, and it's exciting, and it's just something different. They're two different things for two different people.
Well, to finish off what you were saying is, it's a little bit of a reach to try to compare dogs because, like you said, they've been around for hundreds of years, and there's absolute documentation of the animals, even though they're all the same thing. We haven't got that part with reptiles yet. There's nobody documenting if these animals were, let's say, Alterna. The black gaps are actual black gap Alterna, and they're documented so much. And when you buy from that person, it will come, but it's not there yet.
That's not a registry or a pedigree for them.
Right.
That's
But-
a good example.
Yeah.
So that's a great example. That's the funny part is I don't even think we'll ever be able to document retics like we could that because of the fact that we can't pull in the genetics and go research every single place like we could. And so
Right.
whatever we do have, we need to hang on to at the end of the day because Sulawesis, for instance, you know, it's like that would probably be, you know, 30 locales in that huge island.
Right.
Especially
Yeah.
if you look at the island, it's got 3 big long fingers, and then probably big huge ranges, and then you got the whole factor of humans cutting off sections of it and isolating islands amongst the island. And so at the end of the day, I think that localities are awesome as long as they're legit and the data is real and it's not, you know, well, that's what he told me, so therefore it's justified. You know
Exactly.
what I mean?
I'm going to show you a cool example. Hang tight. Jake, tell us about Sulas. I'll be right back.
Jake, give us you're a successful breeder. Give us your 3 best tips.
What was that? I'm hearing like an echo really bad.
What are your 3 top tips as a breeder?
As a breeder, as far as breeding or keeping?
Both.
The biggest thing I notice is people don't see when they're trying to breed, they don't feed their animals enough. Like retics take a lot of food to get the cycle. At least for me, my animals seem to eat a ton right before breeding season.
That's a dwarf retic.
Yeah, see how small the dwarf
What
retics
is
are?
that?
Okay. I know what I'm talking about. I found the true dwarf retic. You can tell because of the checkered belly.
That's awesome.
No, I wanted to bring these as an example so everyone knows this is a corn snake, and this is an OKT corn snake, which is an actual like region. That's a locality, right? It's like Jasper County, South Carolina, right? Is the OKT type corn snakes. So I bought these because I was like, cool, locality corn snakes, that'll be fun, and I can go collect some in the wild. Then I found out pretty much all the OKTs in captivity is bullcrap. They're not from OKT, they're crossed into everything. Because then you find, OKT head Amory, OKT head albino, OKT, I have an OKT scaleless in the other room. It's like, wait a minute, they found all these in Jasper County? No. What happened was somebody redefined it to mean if it's red with a bold black thing and the white checker belly, you can call it an OKT. It has nothing, this animal may have 0 OKT influence. It could be every other thing blended until it looked like
But
one.
it looks like one.
It does look like one. And this one has at least some
No, that's
OKT
the
in it.
point. Is that's the point that I have is just looking like one means nothing. I mean, people telling me their super dwarfs are laying 30 eggs and 20 eggs, and I laugh. I just think, wow, talking about a generalization, it's amazing. A super dwarf laying 20 or 30 eggs has got to be like, you know, a mainland that's 5 feet laying eggs. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me because I just seen too many original imported animals and worked with a big group and you know, fought with my big group to barely get what I wanted out of it. And so at the end of the day, you know, I can't stay on much longer. So I'm going to real quick tell everybody my stuff. And, but you know, at the end of the day, whatever you like to do it with all your heart. And if it's a locality, man, do it because you want to keep those localities straight, clean, and right. And if you want to do it for morphs, Do it because you want to make beautiful morphs in all different kinds of colors and beautiful snakes. It's fun. And as far as breeding retics goes, Jake said it exactly right. Retics need a lot of food during their cycling, especially super dwarfs, in order to cycle. If you want a mainland to stay small, it's very simple. Feed it lightly, and then if you want to breed it, wait till breeding season, introduce the male, feed them heavy, and then when they go into their cycle, they're quit eating for 5 to 6 months, lay their eggs, and then wait until feed them back on a maintenance diet, and you can keep a mainland retic 12 feet and breed it for 3 years in a row, no problem at all. It's at some point, if you miss one cycle, it's going to get big. And that's the reality of retics. Because if you feed them a lot during non-cycles, they're going to get gigantic because they use all that energy for growth. And a mainland, if it has the right genes, it's going to turn into a big snake. Right, Jake?
Yep, that's true. That is 100% true. I have a 10-foot female right now that I like, exactly like you said, just fed her light, maintenance fed, and then she's bred for me 2 years in a row. Perfect egg.
Yeah,
So
it works. Honestly, it's the best way to grow a snake in order to breed it is feed it lightly. And, I'm sure that, if you're going to buy a super dwarf, if you want to be small, you need to follow those directions and on how to feed and breed those also. But you know what? All these animals need a lot of food and a lot of weight because they go off food for approximately 5 months because you got the cycle, the laying. And of course, we take our snakes and take them off the eggs most of the time to get a higher success rate, which gets them back on food earlier, which is not natural, but it's nice and consistent to the animal and, gives the animal a break in life. And so that's one of the reasons why we do it. But if you feed them heavy right after they lay eggs, and you pull the eggs, you're going to end up with a bigger snake, no matter if it's super dwarf, mainland, or whatever it is. It's going to be the larger size of whatever it is. But you'll never be able to feed a real super dwarf locale and take it and make it a giant snake, no matter how much you feed it either.
They just get fat. They're not getting longer. They just get fat.
Correct.
And then they die.
So
They don't do good when they're fat.
I want to ask you 2 questions. Number one, do you have reptiles in your house? And number 2, what do you think the biggest morph is going to be this year?
What was the last question?
What will be the biggest morph this year?
That's a great question. I'm not sure because I have to see what they hatch out, but I'm working on a couple. I have 2 clutches in the incubator I'm pretty excited about. One is a Motley Golden Child, Platinum, Tiger, Pieds. I'm pretty excited about that because in Saudi Arabia, we made some titanium. Oh, Jake, close your ears for a minute. I made some titanium Pieds, tigers, and they're stupid. They're incredible. They're 80% white, just incredible animals. One of the best looking pied crosses I've ever seen in my life. And that pied cross I just said is Citron also. And so the Citron really does nice stuff to the pieds. And so, like I said, I use a lot of the other genes, the recessive genes, to work on pattern and color in order to tweak what I'm trying to do, because we've always been, Tim works for me, and Tim is the man, and he really likes to put the detail to the work. And so we discuss it all day, all night, and then we decide how we're going to get there. And sometimes we agree, sometimes we don't, but we tried both ways. When we don't, and we do, we go as hard as we can. And so we're back at it real hard right now, and we got a lot of really cool things. We took a couple risks with our newer morph, the rainbow, and we bred that. We took a baby that we grew up, and so we're hoping to maybe get some rainbows with Sunfire and Tiger in it. And so we got a few things that we're working on. So get ready. Who knows? What's that?
Breed it to an anthrax.
Yeah, I haven't done that yet. But, we got a lot of projects going. We hope to have some pied anthrax relatively soon. And we have a lot of, this year we're kind of getting back in the game. We've made about 300 different new morphs over the years, maybe a little bit more than that, actually. We kind of quit counting at about 250.
We had to be close to 300 when I was working there. And
yeah,
that was
we were.
7 years ago.
That's about the time we quit. We were in the 280 zone, and we
Yeah.
just kind of quit counting. But we've made this year alone, we got some. We've messed around with our anthrax stuff, and our heads are spinning with some of the new things we're coming out with. So I don't know what 2020 holds 100%, but will be fun. And everybody, no matter what, make sure you're having fun with what you're doing, and ignore the haters, because you know what? That's just because they have nothing fun to do. That's all.
Good
Jay,
to see you,
Well,
Jay.
I want to thank everyone for being here today. You guys are all amazing.
Well,
And
one more clarification.
okay.
So the pickle about this snake is that the guy that bred these does not want to be told. So we can't tell anybody who produced these snakes. That was the contract obligation, and we're going to stick with it till the end. He asked us to put our reputation on the line to say these are Sulawesis, and we're willing to do it. Not that we have anything to worry about as far as reputation and losing it, but that's just one of the things that's a problem with people saying they're not true Sulas is because nobody knows where they came from. I don't know where they came from, and she does. I don't.
Are we able to get more pictures of the adults?
I will
At
give
least
you
a
what
full
I
body
have.
shot?
I will ask for better photos of the parents to send to you.
well,
Awesome.
I know one
Awesome.
thing. I can guarantee those have Sulawesi in them at the minimum, but
Oh, by far. Absolutely.
I can't say they're exactly what the Sulawesis that I saw look like, but then, like I told you, there's no way in the earth that I would know what every kind of Sulawesi looks like because I only seen them from one importer that basically came from one exporter that only was exported maybe 8 times, and they happen to be very carbon copy. And that snake has 25% of its body has that pattern. And so if those came off of 2 wild caught snakes, then the question is, are they both from the same region? And if they are, that's a pure blooded snake. You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
but it'll be
That's
fun.
true. We have no
Send me the
idea if the
pictures,
guy
too.
that went out and collected them.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you guys so much. This was an amazing show. I have mad respect for all of you. Everybody in this group is doing amazing things, and you all are awesome. So thank you so much.
Take care,
Marita and
everybody.
Thank
JD,
you.
Nice
thanks for
seeing you,
giving us.
Jay. Nice
Yeah,
seeing
thank you for
again,
letting us use your
Garrett.
platform. Good to see you guys.
Yeah.
Have a great
Take
night,
care,
everyone.
guys.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
take
you
care.
all.
I'm going to take off
Appreciate
and go out with my wife. She's like 20 minutes put off.
Oh no!
See everybody later.
All right.
Thank
Don't tell her it was
See
my
ya.
fault.
Yeah. Okay, bye.
Take care, guys.
Okay.